Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 650, a lesson before receiving wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. The podcast objectives are reveal the link between wisdom and the Torah of life, analyze the procedural model for the will of Elohim, reveal why knowledge can't save you, and reveal why we must be committed to the path ahead. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. Wisdom is the power to piece it all together. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 680 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we analyze the primary drivers of effectual prayer and the topography of the spiritual plane of knowledge. In doing so, we have covered all the lessons the Ruach desires us to consider in our series on knowledge. And although there is much more we could have shared in that series, time is of the essence, my friends, always of the essence. Ergo, we must make haste and we must move on to the next degree of holiness in our path. That would be wisdom, i.e., the primary degree of knowledge, a critical matter, which makes wisdom the principal thing. Here is why. Knowledge is not only the critical degree of power, but it is also the primary inflection point in our quest for holiness, perfection, and everlasting life. Ergo, as wisdom is the primary application of knowledge, wisdom is the primary objective of our quest. That is, to execute the will of Elohim and the Ruach of wisdom in accordance with the knowledge we have received. And seeing as this is the path that leads to everlasting life, wisdom, my friends, is the principal thing. Now, Proverb 4, 5 through 13 is revealing. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget, and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Hear, my son, and accept my words, and let the years of your life be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in straight path. When you walk, your steps shall not be hindered. And if you run, you shall not stumble. Become strong in discipline. Do not let go. Watch over her, for she is your life. Now, this passage clearly reveals the connection between wisdom and the Torah of life. Remember, the Torah of life is the law upon asking, seeking, and knocking, and the key to the procedural model for greater works. Here lies a wonderful revelation, which is one of the greatest treasures I have shared with you in this podcast ministry. And seeing as we are transitioning to our analyses of wisdom, you should expect many more. Now, get this, the procedural model for greater works is the key to guarding the Torah of life, which is an evolution of wisdom. Ergo, the procedural model for greater works is, in fact, wisdom. Now, there are many treasures hidden within this revelation. And the good news is we have already touched on many of these treasures. Ergo, the only thing that remains is for us to piece it all together. And by the Ruach of wisdom, we, my friends, will piece it all together. Let's get started. Wisdom is the only thing. Now, first things first, the primary objective of wisdom is to execute the will of Elohim in accordance with the knowledge he has revealed to you. And this is how we know wisdom accounts for the procedural model of Yahuwah's will. Along these lines, wisdom is revealing how you should execute Yahuwah's will after you have received it. We know this because the procedural model reveals the how factor, and the how factor is always the most critical factor. Now, this should sound very familiar, for last Friday we completed the first frame of our detailed analysis on the procedural model for greater works. And here is what we found. The procedural model is also the most critical model for greater works. To wit, the most critical factor in doing greater works is quite simply knowing how. Now, as it pertains to the will of Elohim, the how factor reveals the standard we must follow in our execution of the will of Elohim. And if we fail to follow this standard, we will fail in our execution of Yahuwah's will. And whatever work was accomplished will not be approved unto Elohim. Now, this analysis speaks to the difference between knowledge and wisdom. To wit, knowledge, amongst other things, is equated to the conceptual model, i.e., the what factor. In effect, by knowledge, we know what the will of Elohim is. Notwithstanding, there is no value in knowing what Yahuwah's will is if you fail to execute his will according to the knowledge you have received. For the man who knows the will of Elohim and does not do it is an informed fool who does not believe. Facts. Now, this is where wisdom comes onto the scene. To wit, wisdom is the key to unlocking the Torah of life. For wisdom gives us power to execute the will of Elohim in accordance with his standard. For by wisdom, we know how to walk in accordance with his standard. For as you have learned, Yahuwah is not only interested in what you did, quite the contrary, for he is even more interested in how you did it. And this is especially the case as it pertains to his will. And this is why wisdom is the Torah of life and the key to unlocking the power of asking, seeking, and knocking. For if we walk in the ways of wisdom, we will receive, we will find, and the door will be opened unto us. And thus, wisdom is not only the main thing. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, wisdom is the only thing. For if we fail to unlock the power of wisdom, we could know all things, and at the same time, we could do nothing with all the knowledge we have received. Ergo, as we analyze all the lines and precepts of wisdom, I implore you to always remember knowledge may be the greatest power on earth, but if you fail to unlock the power of wisdom, you will never realize the full effect of knowledge. And in the sure course of time, all the knowledge you have received will eventually be lost. So, once again, take my advice and get wisdom. And in all thy getting, get understanding. A transition in our focus. Now, let's talk logistics. Along these lines, we have just unlocked the power of knowledge. And in doing so, we accomplished two key goals. Get this. By unlocking the power of knowledge, we defeated 8 of the 16 deadliest degrees of lawlessness. Not only this, but we also initiated the progression of life. In doing so, we ensured that we will never fall into the progression of death if we stay in the way of holiness. Now, that said, it should be clear that the nature of our quest has shifted, and we have touched on this matter before. Vis-a-vis, from faith to knowledge, our focus is on unlocking the power to receive the will of Elohim. In like manner, our focus from wisdom to love is on unlocking the power to execute the will of Elohim according to his standard. And as our next series will be dedicated to wisdom, we, my friends, are initiating a transition in our focus. Now, you can see this transition in focus by observing the image to the right. To wit, faith, obedience, virtue, and the fear of Elohim work together to ensure that we are positioned to receive knowledge and the will of Elohim. And thus, these levels all lead to knowledge. Ergo, all the lessons I have taught you thus far in this exposition of lawlessness have brought you to a spiritual plane where you can receive the will of Elohim by his word. From now, you must use all the powers you have unlocked to take the next step. Vis-a-vis, you, my friend, must now become a doer of the word you have received. For look, listen, it has been written, become doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For he that looked into the perfect Torah, that of freedom, and continues in it, becoming a doer of work, this one shall be blessed in his doing of the Torah. Now, this verse captures the variance between knowledge and wisdom, which we have touched on throughout this podcast ministry. And the Ruach is leading me to focus on it for the following reason. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. The majority within our nation, past and present, have been content with operating in the Ruach of knowledge, but they have not been diligent to operate in the Ruach of wisdom. Plainly speaking, they are willing to hear the word, but they are unwilling to do the word. Now, that was the inflection. Here is the problem. Vis-a-vis, there is no salvation in hearing the word. My dear friends, search the scriptures and you will see the wicked have always been punished, for they refused to obey the will of Elohim. Therefore, in the spirit of the watchman, I implore you, don't be deceived into believing that your knowledge of the word can save you. Look here. The only thing that can save you is your willingness to do the word that he gave you. And that is the goal of the next series in our exposition of lawlessness. Not only this, but it will be the goal for all the remaining series in this exposition. Here is why. All the remaining degrees of perfection are expressions of wisdom. To wit, they are all designed to increase our levels of execution to the point where we become masters of Yahuwah's will. Now, here again, you can see this by the image to the right. Vis-a-vis, all the degrees after wisdom are designed to transform you into a master of Yahuwah's will. That includes temperance, endurance, patience, joy, peace, godliness, meekness, kindness, mercy, and love, which is the completion of the Torah. Amen. Stay committed to the path ahead. Now, many will consider these matters, and like the rich young ruler, they will reason within themselves that there must be some other way into everlasting life that does not require them to achieve perfection in the set apart spirit of Elohim. And to our good fortune, none of them are here. My dear friends, you must believe me. All the false Hebrews, pretenders, and the like have never made it this far in this quest. For the path that leads to wisdom is reserved for those who achieve their spiritual best. Nevertheless, you must consider this, even though we are the spiritual elite and true contenders for the seal of Elohim, the path before us will not be easy. As I say, the path we are traveling is narrow and hard pressed, which is why we are being set apart from the rest. Now, that said, the Ruach is leading me to increase your motivation so that you stay committed to the path ahead. To wit, two crucial reasons why you must not allow the enemy to deceive you into circumventing the path that empowers you to become a doer of the word. Now, I have captured these two reasons in the image to the right. Enter the spiritual models of atonement and mastery. Let's talk about them. Now, let's begin with mastery. As you know, we have analyzed the pillars of mastery in prior podcasts, and most recently in our series on greater works. Along these lines, the pillars of mastery empower you to become masters of Yahuwah's will. Now, as you can see, there is an order to mastery. To wit, mastery begins with power, which leads to authority, which results in dominion. And the man who has obtained dominion is operating at the highest level of mastery as it pertains to the will of Elohim. Enter Yahushua Messiah. Now, I ask you to pay close attention to the levels within the pinnacle of holiness, where you will experience an upsurge in your degrees of mastery. In doing so, you can see that we are on the verge of one now. To wit, the transition from wisdom to temperance is depicted by an upsurge of power that results in authority. And as you know, authority is crucial in your ability to do greater works. Therefore, knowing that we will not survive these last days apart from the levels of authority required to do greater works, we must stay on the path that got us here. For you will never fulfill the Torah of life if you fail to translate your power into authority. And that, my friends, is clear. Now, this brings us to the second reason, vis-a-vis the atonement process is also aligned with the pinnacle of holiness in the same order as the three pillars of mastery. Now, we analyze the atonement process in our Word from a Watchman series from December 19th, 2025 through January 30th, 2026. Now, although I would encourage you to listen to every podcast in that 7-part series, I do admonish you to listen to the final podcast in that series, to wit, a detailed account of the Torah of Yahushua Messiah, Part 7, which was posted on January 30th, 2026. For that podcast reveals why we will not be saved in these last days if we are not covered. Here lies the inflection, which you can see by the image to the right. Vis-a-vis, the covering is aligned with the level of godliness. My dear friends, we have barely ascended to the interval of wisdom. Ergo, we have a long way to go before we check all the boxes to ensure that we are covered by the seal of the Most High Elohim in these last days. Now, I am not saying this to scare anyone or to cause mass panic. Remember, the model you see to the right is not a rule, it's the standard. Ergo, Yahuwah will qualify everyone who is following his standard, which is why we must stay on the path to perfection and be committed to doing the word. If we do, then Yahuwah will cover us, no matter where we are at in our quest for holiness. And for us, that is the interval of wisdom. Praise Yah. Now, there are many more reasons why it is in our best interest to press the battle to the gate. And if you need more, there's a very good chance that you are not going to make it. For the path before us gets harder, and odds are you will forsake it. For all others, I beseech you by the mercies of the Most High to put on the whole armor of Elohim and get ready for the main event of your quest. For the path we follow from knowledge will be the ultimate test, and you will not survive if you don't stay committed to the path ahead by giving it your spiritual best. Selah. Now, here is the final word. The most critical path is the path ahead, for all who leave it will soon be dead. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, the race is not given to the swift, and the battle is not given to the strong, but the one who endures to the end, he alone shall be saved. Now, that was the inflection. Here is the problem. Vis-a-vis, the masses don't have what it takes to endure. For as they lack wisdom, they lack the power to run this race. And without the power to succeed in the battle, they will stumble in the way, and they will surely lose their place. Heretofore, I recommend, stay committed to the path ahead and fasten yourself to pass the next test. For every victory you obtain on this spiritual journey will strengthen and support the rest. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson, and if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com, and I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 650, a lesson before receiving wisdom. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 651, an intro to wisdom, part 1. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim, continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.